Mr. Shawn Moynihan. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, Joey. How about you?
Shawn, I'm doing all right. I have to know this before we really jump into it. And what is there one word that you go out of your way to never use in any way, shape, or form, whether it be written or spoken?
um, yes, and it doesn't have much to do with journalism, but it's the word play date.
Fair enough. Is that because of just it sounds less serious than it should, or what's the context? Why does it
It's
bother you?
that's a word that always irks me because it puts structure, adult structure, around something that should just be spontaneous and fun. For kids. To say like, oh, we're having a play date tomorrow. I mean, my son is 11, and thankfully, that's a word that's no longer part of the vernacular. But it's one of those things that it brings too much structure and too much adultism around it. That should be just kids playing with other kids or kids hanging out with other kids.
Sean, I think maybe 1,000 word sort of think piece on the origins of Playdate might be in order. I'm sure it exists probably somewhere on the internet, but I mean, it's a word that, or it's a phrase that you didn't hear too often. At least I know was not even used when I was growing up. So it had to have kind of at least kicked in at some time in the last, 15, 20 years, I would imagine. For me, Sean, if I had to pick a word, it's definitely pet peeve, which is strange because it's a word that sort of describes that. But I think it sounds dirtier than it needs to, and I'm really not sure why people need to say it. It's just I feel like we can say it bothers me, and I think we can move on with our lives. But
Totally
let's move on
agree.
to a little something serious, Sean. In terms of the day job, I mean, what are you seeing across the industry? I mean, again, you like to communicate with the folks around the industry. How do you think the evolving landscape of the words we're using in the industry, how we communicate with each other, what is that looking like for you? And how do you think it has changed, again, over the last 10, 15 years, maybe?
Well, I mean, if we could start with say how it's looked in over the past year, it's been really interesting to see how everybody working from home and everybody existing in a virtual environment through interviews and Zoom calls and everything has really leveled the playing field a lot with top executives. I find that I speak with because it's far more humanizing than your typical, speak to somebody in a conference room or a boardroom type of interview environment. Whereas if it's something like this, it's a lot more personal and a lot more intimate. And you've got, the dogs barking or the doorbell ringing, things like that that are completely beyond your control. So I find that a lot of the most of the executives that I speak with, are a bit more loose, and a bit more honest, and not that they were dishonest before, but a lot more relaxed and more natural, perhaps, than they would have been previously. I can tell you though that one thing that always comes up that's happened. I've seen the landscape change in the past. I'd say, yeah, 7 to 10 years. Is that now? Almost every interview I do, at regardless of the level of executive that I'm speaking with, everybody wants questions in advance now. It was never like that before. I mean, I did this for years and years and years, and hardly ever would anybody want questions up front. But now that's become a prerequisite now.
Well, it's very interesting. There's a lot of ways I kind of want to go there, Sean. I mean, unless you do the hostage video, like in front of a blank wall sort of thing. I mean, even just like the little things that you pick up in the background, it's hard to hide, right? It gives you a little taste of who you're dealing with. I mean, so one, what do you think that relaxation has done for, again, the insights to the industry in terms of how people are able to sort of view these executives? And then two, you said people are looking for preparation. One, that's bad news for me in terms of how I usually do things. But what do you think it is about them wanting to be prepared on a level that they maybe never were before? Maybe is it that sense of comfort that they're trying to compensate for potentially?
The reason why they want questions up front is twofold. One, because assistants and directors of communications want to do a better job, and sort of justify their existence, a bit more by, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but sort of, add value, perhaps is probably a better way to say it. Add value to what they do by prepping their subject as much as humanly possible, beforehand. And the reason for that is because I think there's a lot more scrutiny now, and the margin for error is so small. There was a time, decades ago, where some of the top guys at Lloyd's, could rattle off a sarcastic answer in an interview, and it had no traction. It didn't get seen further than the print publication. But then you bring the internet into everything, and then everything is amplified. So good and bad, and what happens there is then if you're the leader of a multi-billion-dollar company, or organization, then the onus is on you to try to be as perfect as humanly possible, with every response all the time. And you could tell who's had that kind of training, just by watching interview answers. You watch somebody in a video interview, or I could tell, when I'm speaking with somebody, some executives are super scripted. They know what they want to say beforehand, and other people are, gloriously off the cuff. Each has its own, value. I mean, I've yet to do. It's amazing. I've been covering this industry now for almost 10 years, and I've yet to have a bad interview where it was just all one word answers, and and it's because I had those in my in my newspaper days. I was the entertainment writer at the Staten Island Advance. That was my first gig, and there were. And I can tell you those stories. There were one or two there that are pretty entertaining, But nowadays, it's everybody just wants to, really just come out off as polished as possible in a way that they hadn't previously, I think.
What do you think that does for the trickle down effect of information, right? Because we all kind of want to feel like we're we know these people in some ways, right? I mean, what benefit do we have from the industry standpoint of the people that are on the front lines, the agents kind of doing the bidding of these larger companies? What do you think the downfall is of that sort of separation? And do you see any benefit to the folks that maybe are a little more off the cuff than others?
I do, because what it provides, and that's a great question, and I think what it provides there is a sense of transparency from the top that you need. I think, I mean, personally, in leading an organization, you're the folks on the ground, boots on the ground, need to know that you're not perfect, and you're not always going to have the perfect answer, to everything, but that you're going to be sincere in the way you lead the organization. And I think being a little more off the cuff, speaks to, knowing your craft and being prepared.
Well, right, because that transparency, it comes with a price, and like you said, being able to be transparent in the right ways, right? Because like you said, we are
Mm-hmm.
walking a tightrope nowadays with what we say online, but being able to do it responsibly, I guess, and I think kind of where I want to go with that is in terms of those leaders and the things that you sort of learned from them across your time. Is there anything that sort of stands out in terms of what has surprised you most in terms of these guys that are leading such large organizations that might be beneficial to, again, the agents on the ground, sort of looking to get an insight and to kind of run their agencies better?
In the time I've been covering this industry, I'm always amazed by the fact that the bigger the executive, the nicer the person in almost all cases. The higher up the chain you go, usually the kinder and nicer the person is. So which is always impressed me, with very, very little exception. One of the first interviews I did covering this industry was sitting down with the then chairman of Lloyd's at RIMS. And it was literally like maybe the second interview I ever did, covering the industry. And you can't bluff your way through, and you shouldn't, ever bluff your way through, through an interview. And I was transparent about the fact that, I'm a career journalist. I just started covering this industry, and he was amazing, and we sat and talked me through it and gave me a great little out of the box, education on how, on how the industry works. So it's moments like that where you realize that most of the most successful people in this business are the ones who do right by others.
Yeah, and that's been definitely my experience as well too. It is maybe surprising, but maybe also uplifting in some way, shape, or form. Restores some sense of hope and humanity. I guess from that lesson that you learned from the chair of Lloyd's to now, what has changed of your sort of view of the industry? Your sort of interest level in it, and sort of how you fit and where you feel excited about where it's going.
It's interesting. I might be one of the only people who ever used the word fun and insurance journalism in the same sentence. but but if in my experience, if you really enjoy the creative process and the craft of journalism, anything is fun, to cover if you're really enjoying yourself and enjoying the work. What I'm currently excited about is we've made the shift where Euromoney made the decision to sunset Reactions, where I was most recently editor in chief, and now I'm on Insider Engage, which is a lot more feature oriented and forward looking than the Insurance Insider, even though we're in the same family. Where the Insider is more long form journalism. It's profiles. It's the type of content that is most germane to and most interesting to executives, to C-suite people. So that is exciting to me because it's taking what I feel I do best, as a storyteller, and pushing that to 11, and being able to take that skill set and apply it to that kind of storytelling, where you're not just talking about the industry, and because there's always going to be that piece, to it. It's balancing that with the humanity of the subject. When you've got both of those things happening at the same time, and you're able to, shed some light on this human being that's leading this organization and the work itself, what they're doing, in to successfully lead that organization. If you're able to marry those two, then you really have something special. And I feel like that's what we're bringing to the table.
Yeah, and it's definitely like that look that you aren't traditionally seeing, and so I guess that was kind of one thing I wanted to touch upon a little bit was the idea that with companies having more and more ability and power and reach to sort of tell their own story, with insurance, with most things being slow to sort of pick up that torch, how do you see that sort of transition, sort of dance transpiring within the traditional media per se? What does that relationship look like to where they can feed off of each other, help one another, sort of again communicate? Like, what do you? I guess maybe ultimately, what do you see the best sort of blend of communication for the industry, be it first party, third party, moving forward?
That's well, you know what, I would say that it's absolutely true that organizations are looking to control the narrative a little more than they were previously, even more than they were 5, 6 years ago. That they're very eager to present a certain message, and follow through on that, and hammer that home as much as possible. But I know that, so I sort of recognize that that's how the sausage is made. So I'm fine with talking to directors of communications and saying, okay, well, I know that there are certain points that you want to make here. So what are they? So that I know, so that I can sort of weave that into the narrative and do it in a way that's not that you're not a shill. That you can weave that into the narrative to get to a place where everyone's happy, but you haven't sold out. So that's the trick, these days, and that's hard to do. I mean, it's amazing to me years later that I hadn't realized for the longest time that being a great writer and a great reporter were two completely different skill sets, and you could be one and not be the other. What happens there is that if you're if you're leading the charge editorially, there's a certain spirit and tone and voice of the content of the brand that you're in charge of that has to be unified, and it has to be consistent. So if you're the one whose name is at the top of the masthead, that everything had better speak with one voice, I think.
Sean, if you could give agents at home sort of your one tip to better communication, better storytelling, better unification of all those things, because again, we've never been guilty of being excellent in terms of that front. What's the one thing that you think you could tell agents to really focus on to communicate better with their clients in this sort of new digital environment?
I'd say that outreach to clients, I'd say, is incredibly important, especially from the agent level. I was with National Underwriter Property and Casualty before this, so I fully get like the agent broker side of the house, but before I came over to to cover the reinsurance side. So I'm very, very much in touch with the fact that, agents are not going to ever be disintermediated simply because they have such incredibly deep value, personal value to the people, to the clients they serve. And in order to prove that value on a daily basis, it's communicating with clients and always and checking in with them, throughout the year and not just at renewal time. Checking in with them, like what's new at your organization? What have you done lately? What have you brought on? And because then that informs your risk profile more. Which I think it's a win-win for everybody. And having a personal relationship, with the people you serve is key. I think in any industry. I mean, that's why, I think I've been, I've had the success that I have, in this bit so far in covering this industry, because people know I'm going to be straight with them and that I'm going to be authentic. And if you do that, if you practice that daily, with the people you work with and the people you interview or clients that you serve, if you're authentic every day and you're consistent, I think that speaks volumes. I think you can only benefit from from regular outreach and just being transparent and just being authentic with people. I think is key to being successful no matter what you do.
All right, Shawn, I got three more questions for you, sir. The first one, very simply, what's one thing you hope you never forget?
Wow. Okay, I'll tell you a story. When I was in National Underwriter, we got involved with we were involved with WCI, the Workers' Comp Institute, and what we would do is every year we would help give out an award, and we were part of their annual ceremony. And every year they would invite me to come down to they host a volunteer day at a place called Give Kids the World, which is a storybook themed village where families of a usually terminally ill child like come for a week, and they go to Disney World and SeaWorld and Universal and everything for free for the entire week, and they stay at this village, and it's in Kissimmee. They stay at the village all week and they're treated like royalty, right, the entire time. And about 5 years ago, I had a transformative experience, like volunteering one day at the village, and I met a little girl who was probably about 8 or 9 years old, who just completely changed my perspective on everything. Basically, for the first year that I volunteered in the castle, in the Give Kids the World castle that they have on premises, and you were just greeting families as they came in, because the inside the castle, the entire ceiling of the interior obviously is made up of these little of these stars, these plastic stars that they give to every family when they arrive. And part of their stay is they come to the castle and they write their name. The kid writes their name on it, and they put it in a box, and and this like fairy pops out, and and it's this fun little thing. And what they did was I'm a musician, and they asked me to they said, can you bring a guitar and play, like for the families, right? And I thought, okay, that I can do. So let's do that. So I rented a guitar in Florida. I brought it, and I did the entire shift and didn't get to sing and play because it just didn't feel right. Like, you're too busy helping the families like through this process. It was there. I had like maybe 10 minutes left in like a, whatever it is, 2-3 hour shift. And this family came in, and this little girl comes like bouncing in, and her family follows, and she had like a port in her chest, like where she was like receiving treatments, and she'd already lost all her hair. She had on like a this like frozen baseball cap with like an Elsa ponytail coming out the back, and this girl was just the living embodiment of everything that Give Kids the World like gives these kids. I mean, you can't even imagine what it, as a parent, I can't even imagine like what it's like to go through constant treatments and in and out of the hospital and everything like that on a daily basis. And she was so sweet, and just such a wonderful child. And I said, I'd love to play a song for you if that's okay. And she said, sure. And then, we sat down, and I played Daydream Believer for her. Like what you in a clutch, you go with a classic, right? In the clutch. And we finished up, and she goes, I finished the song and she loved it. And she goes, can I sing a song? It's like, sure, okay. And I took the guitar off and I gave it to her, and she's sitting there and she takes the pick and she's like strumming open chords, and she's yelling, and she's not yelling, she's singing something about a song about how I am brave, I'm a warrior, stuff. And I'm going, oh my God, just keep it together for like another 5 minutes. And after that, she and her family left. I was left by myself, in the castle, and I just went, don't ever forget this moment as long as you live, because you were just given this amazing, beautiful gift that, like, anything that life throws at you, like on a normal daily basis, is nothing compared to what this child is going through. How dare you get upset, or too wrapped up in your own stuff, when there's always somebody who has a much greater challenge than you, and just meets it with such grace. That will always stick in my mind, that you were, I was just given just this incredible fresh perspective on everything, in that one moment. And I'm so blessed that I was able to, to be there, and have that experience.
Well, Sean, there's not a lot of places to go from there, but I'll go ahead and try and ask two tasteless questions now moving forward. Um,
No, please. I'm sorry. I know that's super
on
heavy,
the
but
other side,
but I love telling that story, because it was it. And to be honest with you, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if that little girl lived or not. And honestly, I don't want to know. I don't want to know,
fair enough,
because
fair enough.
she had left such an incredible impression on me, that you know that I wish everybody could have an experience like that.
Well, Sean, on the other side of that, what's one thing you still have yet to learn?
I feel like, at this point in my career, I still feel like I could do a better job of delegating, a little bit more, to be completely transparent. Like and I think a lot of us get so wrapped up in what we're doing that we get not precious about it, but there's sort of a tendency for a lot of us to go, it's just easier if I do it, you know. And I think sometimes when you do that, I think what you're really saying is, I want to do that, or I feel like it will be done best if I do that, you know. Whereas sometimes you just need to, let go, and trust, trust the people around you, a bit more, and to give them the wheel sometimes too. I think I think if there was one thing I could learn, it would be to give a little more control to other people once in a while.
All right, Sean, last question to you, sir. If I were to hand you a magic wand of sorts to reshape, change, speed up, alter the course of insurance in any way, shape, or form, what is that thing? What's it doing? And where's it going?
I would I would create, and it's fun to think that this will actually happen in the next 2 decades, especially given the rate of change that we've seen, even just the last couple of years, in the evolution of digital solutions. I think what I would love to see is a seamless, quick, yet informative digital experience for for personal and commercial insurance, where you get to check in a couple of times a year, where the onus is on the consumer or on the client, almost, to check in a couple of times a year, or conversely, as I said before, you could have outreach from the agent or the broker, what have you, several times a year to check in, just to make sure that outreach is being that's still happening. That's happening with the client. But when it comes time to purchase coverage, especially, this lends itself more to personal lines than commercial lines, right? But a seamless, quick digital experience where you pay for the coverage that you need and don't have to pay for the coverage that you don't. It's a very slick, speedy transaction where the consumer comes away feeling like that was a pleasure rather than a chore. Working in this industry and even covering it, it's very easy to forget that the touch points for insurance with Joe Average is they think about insurance around their health insurance, their car insurance, and maybe their homeowners, and that's it. And all three of those are if you ask most people, that's like having your wisdom teeth pulled. Having to have that interaction with your insurer is deadly. Like none of them want to have those conversations, which is why they put it off so much. And also, I hate to say it, partly the reason why so many risks are underinsured. So if anything, I would create a way in which people could, buy insurance that's actually enjoyable and not something that they dread.
Shawn, this has been fantastic, sir. I'm going to leave it right there.
All right, thanks, Joe. This has been great.